Our next panel is on payment solutions for modern retail. Session moderator is Mr. Devang Nirala. He's the visionary behind Atom. He has 15 years of experience in technology architecture for trading and risk management system and real-time messaging environments. Joining him in the panel are Alok Jha, Vishal Maru, Shashank Joshi, and Arpit Mohan. Alok Jha is the managing director at Cyberplat, India, the second largest payment processing company from Russia. Cyberplat is now leading aggregator in India, directly connected to all operators and servicing over 100,000 touchpoints through relationship of over 100 plus B2B partners. Vishal Maru is the strategic business unit head at Atos Worldline. His expertise lies in sales management, business development, channel and team management at strategic as well as implementation levels. Shashank Joshi is the managing director, Money on Mobile. He has over 20 years of professional experience in the areas of IT and ITES, outsourcing, transition, and management consulting. His vision is simplifying payments to bring the convenience of simplified mobile payments to every mobile subscriber in India. Arpit Mohan is the co-founder and CTO at Gharpay, a pan-India doorstep payment network that enables consumers to pay at the convenience of their doorstep for products that they buy online. Over to payment solutions in India.
Good afternoon. Last 2 days, in fact, yesterday the whole day was spent on discussing about the technology options in terms of how e-com is going to look at technology, what sort of technology options are there. I think what we are missing out yesterday was primarily the payment leg, because without payments, without money, there is nothing. I think the whole e-com will collapse and fall without actually having an efficient payment collection mechanism. Today we have a very elite panel out here, in fact, from different streams. So just to set the context across, we've been always talking about modern retail. Now, if you look at modern retail, people here we are talking on an e-tail conference. Technically, we are talking about only an e-com kind of a setup, e-com kind of a background. But when you talk about modern retail, the lines between online and offline are going to really get submerged. They're going to converge at some place. You have people on e-com platforms who are going and setting up retail storefronts, although not as actually a store, but you have retail electronic storefronts, which has been done by a whole lot of people. You have people like Infibeam, to Big Bazaar, to everybody else trying to set up a retail e-com storefront. To basically, if you look at large retail chains who are trying to set up an e-com kind of an environment, e-commerce environment, setting up their own websites for actually selling out things. And within this organized retail come e-commerce, we have a large set of unorganized retail, which would definitely come into the ecosystem, the overall ecosystem. And they would look at newer ways. I think there would be some amount of amalgamation around happening out there, so that this sort of people can be brought to, not necessarily to an organized retail, but I would call it a sub or a mid-level kind of a solution for organized retail. So when you're looking at organized retail, that's where the industry, the trends are moving right now, where we've seen, I think that's, the experts have already discussed that for the last couple of sessions and all. Having said that, one of the most critical things right now for any channel, for example, for whether it's e-retail or whether it's bill payments or anything else, the biggest challenge they're facing right now is payment collection. And payment collection has always been the challenge per se. People moved on from cash. Earlier, people had cash only. You had stores for retail. When retail came in, you're looking at setting up your payment gateways to point-of-sale machines. Basically, you had electronic channels, which is tomorrow you're going for prepaid cards to mobile payments and various channels on the electronic side. On the other side, basically, on the physical world, you have, let's say, cash on delivery, physical cash being collected, so you have cash management and a whole lot of things happening. Which I think, if you look at the overall cost, let's say a simple case like cash on delivery, I've been talking to a couple of e-com companies, they're saying two issues. One is basically the liquidity issues in terms of getting the money on time, because money doesn't come on time from the courier companies to even their, as long as you're not managing the overall show in terms of delivery, the money is not coming on time. It takes 15 days to 30 days to get the money in. So liquidity is a big concern in terms of, as far as when you're looking at cash on delivery, plus the inherent cost of returns as well as of cash itself. So the idea is basically to look at this panel to look at what kind of innovative solutions we are looking at, what kind of solutions we're looking at, how do we address that in retail. So coming back to the panel out here, if you look at the 4 different people out here which are going to give 4 different spins, I'll start from Alok. Alok has been part of Suida earlier. He's heading Cyberplat, so he's going to look at his perspective in terms of giving a kind of background in terms of how does it feed into the overall retail ecosystem. Shashank, of course, runs I think, one of the largest retail chains in terms of a retail network, more than 100,000 plus touch points, 150,000 touch points. So that's, we can win from his experience. Vishal Maru is from Atos. They've been providing solutions for e-com to basically point of sale. So electronic payments is what we're going to look at. And Arpit, of course, earlier you've spoken, I think the introduction was given as GharPay, but instantly when he tells me GharPay has been sold out to basically delivery, right? And he's coming in a new avatar now, and he's going to look at payment analytics, and he's just launched his platform yesterday. So this is the base we're going to set up. First of all, before I start out, I think I'll start out with Shashank itself, because the biggest problem when looking at even e-com or anything else, we have been talking about COD, cash on delivery, returns, and all those things. Now, my question to Shashank is, Shashank, if you're looking at your network, like you have 150,000 touch points, how are you looking at typically leveraging your network? What sort of efficiencies would you bring into the overall payment ecosystem? Because what's your message, let's say, to an e-com company? Because this is not going to be relevant for maybe a physical store, but for e-com, it's going to be very, very relevant. How do they leverage your kind of a network to be able to provide better payment facilities as a business and as well as to the customers?
All our retail touch points, essentially this entire system is like a mobile payment system. So it's virtually like using a prepaid debit card on your phone, right? So at the retail touch points, they already have the money on mobile currency with them. And the COD model in very smaller cities, if you go to parts of Eastern UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, where we have seen a lot of traction, but a lot of returns on COD again. So there we would deploy a system where our retailers could come in, collect the payment on behalf of the e-tailer, sort of, and issue can be sorted out, because there is a guaranteed electronic payment at a time of booking, and there will be no COD there. The other way of looking at it is, there is a huge segment in India which is out of the e-space rather. So if you're talking about e-tailing here, these retails, they could walk into our retail outlets and get the experience of online shopping through the retail network, now if not individually, if they cannot access it individually. So that is where we could come into play, and we could increase the efficiency here.
Excellent. I think you're talking about a retail storefront as well as payment channel. Alok, over to you. I think you've been instrumental in doing a lot of these things earlier. I think there's a different perspective, because he's said about two things. One is retail storefront as well as payment collection using prepaid kind of an option. Now, what additional innovations can be there? Because using that leverage is going to be most important, because India is run by cash. Let's be real about that. We're not as electronic as we want to be. We would want to be electronic according to the RBI statement, but what is the perspective you would like to give on this?
Sure, thanks. Let's understand India is 90% cash payments. All of India is all about 90% cash payments, and everybody is trying to address this cash getting converted into electronic. What we do is we sit in between, and our perspective is that if we can bring in all kinds of payments onto a single platform, enable all the touch points, so that consumer has only one place and one convenience for making one single payment. If you look at your own households, look at what you do from morning till evening, and it is all about payments. Take the services, take the products. You go to the shop, you buy products. You consume services, you got to pay for it. What happens? Just imagine a situation, you go to the touch point, like Shashank was saying, just do a single bill payment for all the products. I think that's the whole convergence we are looking at, bringing all these kind of payment products into a single platform and enabling the networks so that the consumer ultimately benefits, whether it's an electronic payment or it's a hardcore cash payments. That's the convergence.
Great. I think Vishal, that's where the perspective comes in, because he touched upon electronic payments and convergence. You've been doing, as Atos, you've been driving a whole lot of retail, actually organized retail with your point of sale terminal network. You've been on e-com now. Looking at payments, I think most of the people in the room, I would agree that people have been talking about payment challenges, issues, and everything on payments. Now, it is already there, and the technology is there in place, because I would not say the technology is not there in place. There have been issues out there. But the idea is basically how do you take it to the next level? What is basically the vision into the future? Because if you look at something like a developed country like US, you have seen evolution of mobile payments in terms of Square and Intuit and those kind of devices. So a whole lot of evolution is taking in terms of payments. The original concept of NFC and other things has been, basically people have really thrown that away per se. It's not really evolved as much. So where do you look from the electronic payment side? Where do you look at this helping out the modern retail? What sort of changes and challenges do you foresee in terms of coming across with any new payment solutions, and what kind of payment solutions are you going to look at?
The first thing which I would want to put across is our definition of retail. The way Atos thinks about retailing. So for our definition, the retailing is about striking the right balance between the purchasers and the retailer's expectation. So what we typically do in terms of digital transformation, we look at both the sides. We are looking at the purchaser side, what is there for purchaser. We are looking at the retailer side. Now today, apart from those 4 traditional P's of marketing, there is a new 5th P, which is about payment option. And payment option is one of the most critical element in terms of taking the decision for buying a particular product. So now from a purchaser point of view, how convenient is the payment option has become very relevant now. From the retailer side, the brand establishment with the existing customers or probably with the new customers, operational seamlessness, sustainable profitability. Combining both the expectations, what we have done is that we are looking at the physical workplace, several products available for physical workplace management and also for online space management. And typically the way we want to put across all our solution to the market is that we are into payment management and the information management. And we aggregate the information, we aggregate the payment and bring it to the retailer. And that's how the operational seamlessness, that's how the profitability, the margins for the retailer becomes much more higher than what currently you would do from a traditional way of looking at these solutions. So on the physical workplace, there are POS terminals, now there are dongles, now there are NFC readers, there are PC POS terminals. On the online space, we have online portals, we have mobile payments, we have tablets where you can do the transaction. And all put together, we want to put it under one umbrella where we say there is a common information available for retailers, there is a common payment platform for retailers, and all these various touch points can be brought by...
2 things I would have a question for you, because yes, people introduce you as GharPay, so your experiences as GharPay, you have done a home pickup kind of a solution as opposed to any other kind, because COD you have been there per se. In terms of where do you see the efficiency coming? And second, I would talk to you about analytics, the role of analytics in terms of payment, because one of the interesting things what he is doing is creating a payment analytics engine, and as a e-com or any kind of a retail, so you need to know, because at least on retail storefronts, you're not really as concerned about your analytics, but on at least on the internet, you're really focused in terms of where are your monies coming from, what channels are they coming from, how are they going to, so analytics is how, so second question would be typically how would and what role would analytics play in terms of bringing in efficiencies in the overall payment solutions and payment collections?
A month back, till a month back, we were running GharPay, so where we were doing offline payments and we were picking up from 18 plus 20 cities or so. So over there, to answer your first question, Devang, the inefficiencies that exist today primarily exist primarily on the field. So if we deploy better technology, if we use better, just better route mapping algorithms, for example, that we used last year, and our bottom line went up by 10%. Okay, and so if we just use better technologies to map things out on the field, it'll improve automatically on its own. Penetrating tier 2, tier 3 cities definitely is a huge challenge, primarily because of lack of demand over there. Demand in the sense, not so many people are coming online. It's not profitable to actually operate over there unless you're seeing large amount of volumes. So penetrating tier 2 and tier 3 cities will definitely be a huge issue even for larger players. But at the end of the day, if you manage to leverage technology better, you're going to just reach that break-even point faster. And coming to your second question, Devang, on payment analytics. So this is what we're doing with our new product now called Clink. Now for any consumer, for any business for that matter, the end goal for any business is to provide a better experience to whoever they are serving, be it another business, be it a customer, be it a retail touch point, whatever you're trying to do. At the end of the day, every business exists to kind of up the game a little bit and do whatever is happening today in the world a little better. And to achieve that, you really do need analytics. So like Shashank was talking about payment options that you can use at say mobile or money. So regardless of whether you used card, you used cash, you used NEFT, you did a credit card payment, at the end of the day, you've made a payment, and that is the ultimate stamp of you as a customer acknowledging the product itself. Any number of Facebook likes, any number of tweets about it does not guarantee you buying the product. So this is where we kind of come in right now, and we're trying to consolidate all payment options regardless of how you've paid for a product. We are coming in and saying, okay, there is a lookalike kind of marketing, there's lookalike kind of analytics that happens, that I like a shirt, he likes a shirt, so maybe we are both similar. So whatever the company is giving me, I should give to Shashank as well. But at the end of the day, if I buy something that Shashank has bought or something very similar, that's when you have to kind of draw the parallels and be able to serve, say, Shashank better just because there's now, because of analytics, that Shashank is a big spender. So maybe we should kind of serve him better. That's where we're coming.
Yeah, thanks, Arpit. I think take a break right now from going ahead to the second round right now. Before I do that, I would like to throw it open for the audience to ask any questions if you have, per se, because we've set the context right now in terms of various payment options, various payment channels. So I think rather have, because you have been actually the consumers of the payment technologies or the payment solutions out there. So I think that's a better, whatever issues, I don't think anybody else can understand more than you. So I think over to you for questions, if there are any questions, please.
Shashank mentioned something about 150,000 points in the real world for a sort of collection. I didn't quite understand it. Could you elaborate on it? How does it work on a practical basis?
These are what we typically call mom and pop retail shops. It could be a grocery, pharmacy, pawn shop, convenience store, anything. What we have done is we have plugged in our Money on Mobile platform into that network, and they are using Money on Mobile wallets to do transactions, whether it is a bill payment transaction, a mobile top-up, or a DTH top-up. The entire theory behind that is they have a prepaid balance on their mobile wallet. So let's say a retailer in a main street probably carries 20,000 onto his retail wallet, which is daily volume on an average. So if you want to collect a payment for a product, right, that product can be built into our network, and the consumer can walk to that outlet, which probably is 2 to 5 minutes away from his home, pay for that, and then the delivery can be processed. That is what I was trying to say.
It's a service being offered to third-party e-retailers.
It is a service that's offered to the entire retail, mom and pop retail, where they are plugged into our network, and whatever is our registered merchant, they can avail that service. So if the retailer becomes our registered merchant, we can definitely do that payment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Yeah, please. Yeah, you're back behind.
This question is to Arpit. This is Karandeep. I'm co-founder of a company called Blonker.com. We're into social decision making, which aids in buying decisions. We don't sell ourselves. So we are also trying to get into some part of that analytics that happens on the e-commerce, the retailer sites. So I just wanted to understand a little better of Clink as to how do you manage to what depth you can go to into personal information without, violating certain user privacy and all that security issues. And how are you, engaging with other retailers that, how are you engaging with multiple of retailers and convincing them to come on the same platform so that you have, equal depths of information coming in from each one of them?
Right. So to answer your first question, to what depth we can go without violating somebody's privacy. So most of our engine, our recommendation or our analytics engine sits behind the bank's firewalls. It sits within the bank's environment itself. So all the data that the bank currently holds about you as a person, what you've done, what you purchased, how much you purchased, where you purchased, when you purchased, etc., etc., etc. All that data is already sitting within the bank's environment, and we don't kind of pull it out of there. So the entire analysis, entire recommendation, everything happens over there, and at no point of time there is any personalized information that is ever pulled out. So the depth to which we can go is actually very, very deep, because let's be frank, the bank knows everything about you. So if the bank knows everything about you, the engine will. So the only thing is that we'd never take any data out of the firewall. Coming to your second question about how we are engaging with retailers or with merchants to actually help them kind of take advantage of these insights that we're getting. One of the things that we've done right now, we just launched a private beta for certain merchants. So what you can essentially do is come on the ClinkNow's page. It looks very similar to say a Google AdWords or say a Facebook Insight, and you can just start a campaign. Say you have a new product and you want to launch it to males in Bangalore between the age of 18 and 30, I don't know, with the average income of say 30,000 per month, or we can go down to absolutely that depth. So you identify that these are your this is your target segment, and these are the guys you want to reach out to, and Clink will help you kind of reach them through bank channels.
Okay,
Thanks.
I think like to get into the second round. I think probably, yeah, please.
So I'm Puneet from Nirokam.com. We sell herbal products online. Would you recommend something for the high risk or negative list of industries where it's always a problem to get the payment gateway or on board? They usually reject.
Now, high risk, when we consider high risk, that's more from a merchant perspective, which is about the credibility and the process and the product of the merchant. Now, obviously, with all the changes which has happened from the security standpoint, you have BBV now, you have two-factor authentication now, and you have very sophisticated fraud risk management products built into the online portal, built into the payment gateways. So from the cardholder perspective, you can still manage, but high risk is something which is, I believe, is more of an individual call. So individual call to assess the credibility of the merchant.
Let's take that, because what happens is, if you look at the card associations, there are rules framed by card associations, there are rules framed by the banks individually also. Now in a country, in an Indian context, like Visa and Master would have a superset of kind of rules out there. Certain categories they may permit, for example, even herbal products to certain products they may permit. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a bank's call in terms of, yes, do we want to basically board this kind of a merchant or not board this kind of a merchant? Unlike India, for example, if you look at global shores, you have, let's say, in US and other places, there are processors who actually specialize only in processing high-risk transactions, which could mean basically right from herbal products, because again, technically speaking, when we're talking as from an Atom side, we've been talking to a whole lot of international processors also, so that's where we connect across. So the idea is basically when they look at it, they say we do high-risk processing only, then across segments, it could be pharma products, herbal products, but based on certain parameters. For example, they evaluate in terms of longevity of the business, how long has the business been there, what kind of products do you sell, what kind of turnover and everything. So based on that, they would do a risk assessment and give you a kind of go or no-go kind of a segment. But technically, options available for an Indian player right now for a high-risk segment is basically to use an international processor as versus using a domestic processor. Because if Indian banks have said no for basically certain things, the next logical choice, because if you look at even something like a tech support, there are a lot of tech support people who are providing tech support to US clients, to other clients, and they technically would fall into a high-risk category, and not a single Indian gateway would provide them solutions. And we've been working with a lot of large guys out there who've been there in tech support, but the thing is, we had to get an international processor for them. Even if it was a domestic client who had to route the transaction, we had to get an international client. So that's, I hope that addresses your question.
So while I've been using one of the Indian gateways, we've been approached by processors in Sri Lanka, Mauritius, and all these places. How how would you trust them? I mean, what are the things that we should look?
I think, especially if you're looking at international, my sense per se is you should look and go for somebody who is credible out there rather than being non-credible, because let's face it, from India, the commercials are a lot cheaper, because what the merchants pay right now as from payment processing is a lot cheaper versus what people are paying globally. Global, if you're looking at a global aggregator or global service provider, you're talking about maybe a 10 to 20% kind of a rolling reserve which you need to maintain with them. And if the quality of the merchant processor is not good, you may not get your money back. So that clearly depends on what kind of basically merchant processor you're talking, because there have been horror stories about a lot of merchants who have not got monies if they've gone with maybe processors from Hong Kong to Slovakia to basically a whole lot of places, even Korea for that matter. So we've been talking to a lot of merchants who, my sense would be basically trust somebody who's credible. There are people who are credible out there. It's not that they're not there. So talk to credible partners and then basically get that.
Would you be able to name some of them?
I can take it offline. I will not take it right now. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. I think Vishal touched upon a very good point in terms of risk and fraud, because not as much on, let's say even on the retail storefront, you have issues of merchant fraud in terms of much collusive behavior, to basically customer fraud in terms of customers coming and using cards and disowning and disputing transactions. Same issues are there on the internet, because protection, both from a customer, we have always been talking about customer protection and customer issues. Today, when you're as a merchant, how are you getting protected? Because that is good and most critical, because people are talking only about, let's say, an Indian or domestic card. So when you look at domestic card, you have V by V, and liability shifts out to basically, let's say, to the customer as opposed to the merchant. But even in that case, there are issues in terms of, for example, a customer can just say, I did not get a service. If you sent a good, yeah, service delivery. Service is very subjective. You don't even, how do you define, and in such a case, how do you protect the overall environment? Because that is something which is having a bad effect on a whole lot of, because more and more monies are getting spent on risk and fraud. So one is on the merchant fraud side of it. And second is the customer risk, because at the end of it, the moment you open up your floodgates for international cards, let's say with the international airlines and everybody else, they have been really hit. And India, for example, I'm sure a lot of e-com guys are going to look at gifting as one of the most important things. With a lot of expats sitting out in US or other geographies, they would want to gift out to people in India. Now, banks, as a call, you can say, I will not accept international cards, but that's a huge amount of international traffic you're stopping. So what's your perspective on risk and fraud in that channel? Because those challenges, how do you address those?
So, a very important element of online space is risk and fraud management. That's the, I think, the foremost importance in terms of managing the scalability of the payment channel. What we do is that we have a very sophisticated fraud risk management engine already built into our payment gateway, which works on various velocities, which works on various rules. And the rules are based on the trends, which can be localized trends or which can be global industry trends. So that trends typically define the the approval of the transaction. That is something which is giving us good results. And the payment gateway which we use is called SIPS, which is very dominant in Europe. And we have seen a lot of success in terms of our fraud risk, fraud ratio to sales, fraud to sales ratio. So that's one way of looking at it. Second way is obviously pre-boarding risk. So pre-boarding the merchant, we have integrated risk management team, and that is where we assess the merchant. And he was talking about high risk merchant, and we do the thorough due diligence in terms of taking the merchant on board. And the way we want to actually position ourselves is that if there is a merchant which has been associated with Atos, then even for the consumers, even for the cardholders, it should be the message that this is a safe merchant to transact with. That's what we want to position in terms of the fraud risk management capabilities, what is available with Atos.
Okay, great. I think Shashank, there's a different perspective out here, because when you're looking at cash collections, the biggest concern from e-com or any other company would be basically, how do you trust that agent out there? Because you're talking about...
I'll lose my shirt by that night and I'm done. So there is no question of taking that risk. It is a prepaid model. I think what he was mentioning about merchant boarding and pre-boarding, right? I did card processing in the United States for 8 years. And underwriting is something which is very, very critical to boarding a merchant. Vis-a-vis in India, we've seen very, very different models, meaning I am yet to see full-fledged PSPs, meaning in large number. The bank, it's a bank-led model on that side, and everything happens with bank's approval and this and that. They'll take a fixed deposit. Meaning I went to a few banks which said, give me a fixed deposit, which was completely news to me in a merchant acceptance kind of a model. And the underwriting is absent here in India, and that has to be put in place. I don't know if they are looking at the match list now. 3 years back, they were not looking at the match list. And in US, that is the only thing that we used to do. When you underwrite the merchant, look at the match list, pull the credit, and then board the merchant. So.
Got it. I think, Alok, from your side, any perspective on risk and fraud? Because looking at the channels, there have been horror stories out there in terms of even bill payment and bill collection. So this is a larger transaction.
Yes. Yes, and I will draw a little parallel. We are a Russian company, and in Russia and CIS, we have a system by which, and that's a system which is still not evolved in India right now, where what Shashank was saying and what others are saying, when you're doing a pre-boarding or you're onboarding a retailer, today entire work is manual. Entire work is too much paper-led and too much time-consuming. There you have to simply do a verification with the tax authorities and you get a straight or on a real-time basis. This can happen in India only if we converge the Aadhaar and PAN card for the world and do an instant verification of the retailer or the customer on a real-time basis. We can actually prevent these things happening. There are two categorizations. There are always a fraud and there is a willful fraud. Okay, so you can't do anything about willful fraud. And that's why the machinery of judiciary and police exists. So there will always be a set of people who will always are there to do a willful fraud. But yes, if by mistake and you call it a fraud, there has to be a solution to the whole thing. And that solution still are being built in India right now. And there has to be a very different perspective at the last mile as well. I think prepayment, like we said, we also work with about 100,000 outlets completely on a prepaid basis. That takes care, because the payment is a very small, thin margin game business. And all you have to do is bring in efficiency of payment and ensure that you don't lose that money. One loss, one collection actually can wipe out your businesses. So efficiency, risk prevention through prepayment, I think they're the best.
Wow. I think Arpit, final, Sure.
I think when we are talking about prepayment, the story is right in front of your eyes. Look at the telecom segment. 1993 it started with virtually all contract or postpaid phones at that point in time. And today the situation 20 years down the line is 4% postpaid and 96% prepaid. So that is where it is headed to.
But Shashank, I think the bane of the current modern issues that are facing the country is the same stores, because the KYC issues which are facing right now, that's exactly because of the same stores. I think that's what the reason. Arpit, over to you. I think you've been working on payment analytics. Where do you see the role of fraud analytics coming in? Because piping in information in various kinds, how do you do that?
So fraud analytics, although this is not part of what we do as
exactly. This
but fraud analytics is definitely a huge sector. It's a one of, like, everybody is kind of corroborated it. It's a very, very important segment of the entire payment cycle that happens, because fraud will happen. It will happen. It's all that your engine or your algos or whatever your software or your tools can do is how quickly can you catch it and how quickly can you roll back from that point.
Okay.
So that's the biggest key in fraud management.
Perfect, great. I think over to you, sir.
What about swipe on mobile? Where do we stand? We heard about it yesterday, the Apple Store model being used widely for regular commerce.
Swipe on mobile has been used. I think I'll have Vishal address that actually, but swipe on mobile is predominant in India also. It's not that it's not in India. It's part of the overall card acceptance, because at the end of the day, when it's swipe on mobile, it's a card acceptance device itself. You're using a dongle and having somebody swipe a card. So it's a question of form factor being changing. So It's prevalent in India. A lot of banks are doing it. I think Vishal would like to add on something.
Which is mobile POS. What is that? That is what we call. So mobile POS is definitely picking up now, and look at from the perspective of the acquirer. Now the biggest investment which acquirer makes is in terms of the hardwares, the POS terminals. Second is that if you look at the GPRS terminal model, now on the GPRS terminal model, the business model around in India is that a merchant will have to pay the rental for the GPRS terminal, and mobile POS is a classic example of addressing both the issues, from the acquirer side and also from the merchant side. Now, typically today, if you look at the mobile POS, the rentals are pretty low. Plus, it helps you in terms of the mobility. It helps you do whatever a GPRS terminal would possibly help you doing. From the acquirer side, the investments are low, and obviously the margins are better. So I think mobile POS is something which will definitely pick up. The only thing which we'll have to see is how is that the entire chargeback management or the dispute management works around mobile POS on a larger ticket size transactions. I think that is something which we need to wait and watch. But otherwise, in terms of the small ticket size transactions, I think mobile POS is the best alternative available as of now.
Yeah, I think with this, probably we'll have to end the session. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, and thanks to all the panelists for sharing the views. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing wealth of information. Thank you, Devang, Alok, Vishal, Shashank, and Arpit.